Well, hello there, you beautiful, beautiful people. This is video 2 of 2. So if you've only seen one, you know what to do. After this one, go check the other one out. It's amazeballs. Said by myself. You know what I mean. Anyway, I'm going to get straight into the meat and potatoes, as we are talking about the flip side of the coin. Earlier on, we was talking about what is going on in the Idaho 4 case from the sort of pro system camp. The proper procedure that gives you everything transparent and gets you an outcome where at the end you are confident in that outcome. That was earlier, to sort of question a few things and touch on a few things. But this here is kind of looking at the other side of the coin with regards to, look, why did Bryan Kohberger, if he is an innocent man, if he didn't do this, and he is just someone who was used a patsy, why would he waive his right to a speedy trial? Now, some could turn around and say, look, like I said earlier, he just simply didn't have time. His team didn't have time because the prosecution just didn't have everything they needed to, in effect, do their job properly. And they placed themselves at risk of a trial by ambush. But then you're at a conundrum then, because a trial by ambush technically would mean that they fear that the prosecution has something that they're just holding back as an ace in the hole, which would only exist, technically only exist, if Bryan is indeed a guilty man. And look, I think a lot of people think that Bryan Kohberger is guilty. They have seen what they've seen and they are 100% sure that he is a guilty man and they don't want to hear anything else. And this waiving of his rights to a speedy trial feeds into that, because they will be like, look, this is cowardice. He knows that there is a potential for stuff to exist and he is avoiding going to trial and being found guilty to give his team more time to look at the intricacies of the procedures and try and pull holes in it. Try and pull it to pieces. And look, maybe that is the case. Maybe Bryan Kohberger has just realised that he's not quite as smart as he thinks. And I was thinking to myself, look, if Bryan Kohberger was indeed the guy who did this, I think what has turned people away from thinking that he did do it was because of the likes of Ken Mains, who said this was a crime of passion. This was a crime of passion, and this had to happen in a certain way. So he must have been stalking him. He must have been, fixated on Maddie, perhaps. And then when Ann Taylor comes forward and she's like, well, that doesn't exist, that doesn't exist. There's nothing in the car, there's nothing anywhere. And you kind of think to yourself, well, that then rules that out. So then you're talking about the narcotic situation that's sort of lingering around in the background with some of the parents that are connected to narcotics cases and being imprisoned themselves and arraigned and all sorts of things and fined. And yeah, it puts a little bit of a spin on things, especially when you've then got the likes of Dave and WSU Kim coming onto the platform and feeding those storylines that this was a drug house and a party house, and it feeds that train. But what if Bryan Kohberger is the guy who did it, but this was never about the girls. This was never about being fixated on one of the females in the house. It just wasn't. This was about Bryan Kohberger, someone who all of his academic life had tried to get into law enforcement. He was trying to be part of something that he had held in high regard and wanted to flourish amongst them and to be, highly regarded by his peers in that role. But there was just something that kept holding him back. And there are elements of things you hear that make you think that maybe there was an undiagnosed medical condition lingering in the background. Some people have said he seems a little bit like he's got... I'm not going to put a specific label on it because it would be unfair. I'm not a professional. I'm nothing to do with the medical. But people know that there just seems to be something that makes Bryan seem like he doesn't make the best of friends. He doesn't, he's a bit socially awkward, so to speak. But was this entire situation, and we have touched on this on the past, this isn't new news, But was this simply about Bryan Kohberger being frustrated that he just couldn't break out of the education setting properly and get into the roles? And every time he tried to go directly to law enforcement and do things and get into it, that's when he was getting rebuffed. And like this case with the knife sheath sitting there and driving his own car and taking his phone, but there not being any DNA in the car, nothing being around his house, being no connection to the victims at all. Could this have just been someone that just wanted to show law enforcement that he was smarter than them? He was a smarter guy and they would not be able to catch him. And what we're seeing with this speedy trial wavering, his plan's starting to fall apart as what he thought he knew about the system and how he thought he could play the getting out of this on a technicality and getting himself exonerated, because let's not forget, apparently, if you believe the words of his own mouth, it would be that he was eager to be exonerated. He was eager to get back to Idaho initially. He didn't put any brakes on when it came to getting him from Washington to Idaho. He put his hands up, got over there. So this has always been a fight that he has up to now seemed very confident in. And I don't know, even if he was innocent, but you had this evidence floating around, even though some will argue that it's flimsy. Would you be a little bit scared? Would you be a little bit scared with your knowledge of law enforcement and what has happened in the past, which he will no doubt have knowledge of, that you could yourself be being fucked by the system that you do hold in high regard? I don't know. But look, at the end of the day, speedy trial gone, he's wavered that. And there is an argument either side. Is he just a coward running away from what is inevitability and him getting found guilty and facing his maker? Or is it an innocent man whose team have just realised that they have not been given what they need in time for them to get this done effectively, for them to give him effective counsel, and it would be too much of a risk? And they've realised that with the likes of the FBI going after Stephanie Vargas now, that this is now about, they want him gone. They want this pinned on him, and they will do anything in their power. And does that make them a bit too dangerous to try and challenge? Let me know down below. What are you? Pro-system, pro-Kohberger, anti-Kohberger, anti-system? What does it mean now? When are we going to see a trial? 2025? Behind closed doors. Well, the next thing we hear is that Bryan Kohberger has been shot while we was all looking over there. Catch you all on the next one.